The sound of the shofar, the ram's horn.
It's something that is so primal. When you hear it, it's visceral. It really, like, you can feel it deep inside.
A sacred sound for Jews across the globe and from ancient time.
It comes from this part of an animal, so it's like this really organic, deep sound that we hear that really opens our hearts.
It's heard during the holiest days of the year.
The whole meaning of the holiday is awakening, and that's what this symbolizes.
The shofar, the topic of this edition of Sacred Sounds.
From the deep well of the past, in the depths of our own despair, the shofar sounds remembrance. Remember, my presence goes with you and will lighten your burden. We rise.
Rosh Hashana, the Jewish New Year, September 2015 at the Temple, Atlanta's oldest Jewish congregation.
Teruah,
a Reform congregation. Rabbi David Spinrad calls out the names of the blasts of the shofar, the ram's horn.
Tekiah, Tekiah, Shevarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah.
Alfred Rothstein has been blowing the shofar during the holiest days of the Jewish calendar at the temple for more than 40 years.
15, I think. There was an assistant rabbi who was blowing the shofar, and he was leaving, so he was looking for somebody in our confirmation class to do it. And the person I was sitting next to pointed at me because she knew I played the trumpet, so I was able to do it, and it's been a nice honor.
The honor and tradition of blowing and hearing the shofar go back thousands of years, as Rabbi Dan Medwin of the Central Conference of American Rabbis explains.
Shofar is one of the neatest ritual items, I think, in Jewish life. Jewish tradition has been passed down for thousands of years, and this is one of those tangible elements that has been passed along with it, and the practice still is meaningful and powerful today. It has so many meanings. It has so many uses. It was used as a communication device from mountaintop to mountaintop. It was used as a battle cry in war. It was used as like a triumphant announcement of a new king.
The tradition is also mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. Rabbi Malka Packer is director of Interfaith Family Atlanta.
We know that we're listening to the shofar because it says in the Bible, in Bamidbar, which is the book of Numbers in the Bible, or the Hebrew Bible, or the Torah, that we are supposed to hear this sound. And so, like all Jewish traditions, I always like to teach people, like all Jewish traditions, we have something in the Bible, it's just like a little snippet of information, and over the years, different rabbis have interpreted what does that mean, and how many times do we blow the shofar, and what does it sound like, and now we know we blow it 101 times, and there are these different blasts that we blow, and we know now that it's a ram's horn, and there are these ideas of why the ram's horn. Well, this is the time when we read from the Bible when Isaac was bound by Abraham, and he, instead of sacrificing his son, replaced him with a ram, so we have the ram's horn to remind us of that. So there are many interpretations of why we use the ram's horn, why we blow the shofar.
And though deeply ingrained in tradition, the ritual has been modified in some communities. Rabbi Dan Medwin.
Traditionally, the shofar service is near the beginning of the Rosh Hashana service. But the organization I work for, the Press, just released a new machzor, a new High Holiday prayer book. And it it's wonderful in its contemporary translations, its transliteration, so if you can't read Hebrew, you can still participate. And one of the innovations that it really pushed forward to mixed reviews, but mostly positive, was actually to break up the shofar service throughout the Rosh Hashana service, so that you can really take time and experience the drama of this part of the service instead of just having it and being done with it. It really carries it through and provides a much more climactic ending to the service.
So we also blow the shofar to remind us of Revelation, so the time when the Torah or the teachings were given to us on Mount Sinai, because at that time it is told, the tradition is told that it was like this really, really intense experience, so intense that you could see the thunder and hear the lightning. So it was like opposite of what you would expect. And so there were these shofar blasts during this time that it was just like this huge revelation of all the teachings of Torah were passed down to everyone at the foot of Mount Sinai.
You know, it's something that is so primal. When you hear it, it's visceral. It really, like, you can feel it deep inside. And, you know, you almost feel that sense of connection across eons and connecting you between all of these people who every year at the very least have heard it during the high holidays. And it's just amazing to have that very real connection, very tangible. You know, so much of religion is intangible. To have something very physical that you can touch and that you can hear. And it's actually a mitzvah, it's a commandment to hear the shofar. You're obligated to, because it's such a powerful thing, and it's such a powerful element of the high holidays. You know, it's this wake-up call. It's, you know, it's so easy, especially today, but I think it's true throughout time, to just get into these routines of our life and, you know, just try to get through work and taking care of your kids, you know, and all of the errands and bills, and, you know, that this is as this very real way of stopping us in our tracks, literally, and saying, hey, there's a whole nother level of existence that if you haven't been thinking about that, now's the time to really stop and focus on that. And, you know, it's this sort of ancient alarm clock that waking us up and calling us to experience something higher and more meaningful in our world.
In some communities, the shofar is not only sounded on the Jewish New Year and at the end of the Day of Atonement 10 days later, but during the month of reflection leading up to the New Year.
And it's this time when we are working on ourselves. So it's this time of tshuva, of repentance, that we're turning inwards and looking inside. How was I this year? How do I want to change myself for next year? And it's a time to really reflect on our past year, on ourselves, on our traits, how we've been with each other. Maybe we need to make amends to friends. And listening to the shofar, it's this time to really open up our hearts, our souls, so that we can really be present with ourselves. And it's a really powerful sound.
So I'm a vegetarian, and blowing the shofar and having a shofar, for me, it represents a really unique challenge. I don't like to eat animals. I don't like to wear animals as best as I can avoid. You know, sometimes shoes and a belt are non-negotiable in some settings. But the shofar itself is so, you know, it comes from a ram's horn, or any kosher animal for that matter. And so it was a real struggle for me to embrace this as a religious symbol. But it's so powerful. It actually, it smells really bad if you're on the other end of it, and you know it's an animal body part, which is another visceral and not necessarily in a positive way. So you know, I had a small shofar as a part of my sort of Judaic collection. My mother, who's also a rabbi, came back from a trip to Israel and brought me a really long, curved shofar, which was just beautiful, and I really love. And then for a wedding present, one of our classmates, her father makes shofars, and that's the one I brought with me today. And what's really special about this shofar is that if you look one side is smooth and polished, like you'll see most shofars are, but the other side he left raw. He left the original texture, so you can really see and have this connection with what it originally looked like on the animal. And I think that helped me to appreciate the sense that this animal has part of them lives on in this very sacred purpose and in a very meaningful way, and being able to see that roughness. It's also, a great metaphor for the duality of life and the smoothness and the roughness and those different pieces, and it's all curved together. And don't tell anybody this, but he also makes the mouthpiece a little bit wider, so it's a little bit easier to blow. So when we got that, my wife and I got that as a wedding present, that also sort of re-sparked this interest in blowing the shofar.
For Alfred Rothstein, who became the temple shofar blower at 15, his talent was developed from an early age.
You think about that, and you think about the people who maybe haven't had the experience or training, I guess you could say, of playing the trumpet like I did. My father was a trumpet player in the Atlanta Symphony and taught all of his children. He and my mother was in the Georgia Redcoat Band, and so all of us were trained on playing an instrument. And so that background helps this a lot. So somebody who gets up there, a rabbi or a cantor or a guest or somebody who hasn't had that and does it, you have to admire them even more, because they've worked really hard to try to get whatever notes they can, and they might be blowing a smaller one that's harder to blow, actually, because it has a smaller mouthpiece. So they really deserve a lot of credit for getting up in front of everybody and doing that, just because it means so much.
I played trumpet for a few weeks, I think, but it turned out that I was not very good musically, and my young self didn't want to spend all the time practicing that was required, so that sort of fell to the wayside. Now and again, I'd pick it up, but not very seriously. In rabbinical school, we had a speaker come and do a training session with everybody. And we practiced with these little cardboard tubes that essentially replicate the mouthpiece and are a good tool to practice on. And that sort of reawakened in me the power and the majesty of this instrument. I don't actually work in a congregation. I work for the Central Conference of American Rabbis. It's the national organization of Reform rabbis. And I work also in the press, where we publish a lot. But I don't actually have a congregation of my own. And so when my wife's congregation, the temple, was looking for someone to blow shofar, it was a very special opportunity for me to participate in her community in a very meaningful way. And so I really appreciated that and continued to do that each year. So, essentially playing this very primitive instrument is very challenging. I'm comfortable in front of a crowd when I'm teaching, when I'm talking about certain ideas, leading a service, but playing an instrument of this sort, blowing the shofar, is an interesting challenge for me. And there's a process and there's a reading that most rabbis do before leading High Holy Day services, which essentially says, dear God, I hope that I'm worthy of doing this for the community. Don't let my mistakes reflect negatively upon them. Give me the strength to lead and be a representative of my people. And so I feel a sense of that when I get up there. I'm feeling very nervous because I feel like I've never practiced enough. When I do practice, the kids and our dog all look at me funny, and I wonder what the neighbors think if they can hear it. But when I get up there, I never feel like I've practiced enough for that moment. But I do my best, and really it's, I think if you talk to some cantors during the High Holy Days, they'll say that the singing doesn't come from them. They're a vessel, they're a channel for a much deeper place. And so I feel like when I'm up there blowing the shofar, it's not necessarily me doing it. I'm the vessel, I'm the channel.
Chiavari, Teruah, Teruah, Teruah. Chiavari, Teruah.
Each series of blasts of the shofar, the ram's horn, has a different name. Rabbi Dan Medwin explains.
There are a number of different calls that we say during the service that refer to different aspects of when we hear the shofar. So there's Tekiah, which is the call, and that is just a basic long blast, and that is sort of reminiscent of both the sort of the balance, the complex emotions and feelings we have during the high holidays, the triumph and the joy and the celebration, and the struggle and the battle cry, the challenges that we face in our lifetime. The next one is Shavarim, which is 3 blasts, shorter blasts that go in succession, and it's said that that's sort of like our hearts crying out. That during the time of the high holidays, where we're encouraged to go deep in introspection and spiritual contemplation. It's our hearts crying out, saying, we've done wrong, we haven't lived up to our fullest potential. Help us to reflect on that and to do better next time. And then there's Teruah, which is at least 9 short little blasts, and that is almost like the alarm clock bell ringing. The short, studded, wake us up out of our complacency, out of our sort of spiritual slumber, and get us ready to do the hard work of this sort of spiritual reflection of this time of year. And then there's Tekiah Gedola, and that is the great blast. That is where you just let it all hang out and try, in a sense, to channel the spiritual struggles of the community through that instrument. And you're doing it for everybody's sake. It's there. You're helping them fulfill a mitzvah, a commandment, by blowing it for them. And so they're up there with you, and they're feeling it and participating by listening and being there.
There are long, drawn-out blasts. So, like, Tekiah is a longer blast. Tekiah Gedolah is the really long blast. Like, at the very end of the service, that's when you blow for as long as you possibly can. So people's faces turn red, and everyone's just kind of sitting on the edge of their seats to see how long can they blow the shofar. And
I just, I close my eyes for the Tekiah Gedolah, and I just let myself go. And, it can be such a spiritually powerful thing that I don't even think about the physical need of my breath. Even when my body's telling me, okay, you're done, you're out of air, I keep going, and it's not until, I have to save a little bit for the last little part of it that really ties it up. But I just keep going until I can't anymore, and that, when I'm done, it's exhausting. I feel very drained, but very connected to everybody, very much at peace and satisfied for what I was able to contribute.
So the blessing is Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu Lishmoa Kol Shofar.
And what does that translate?
So that translates as, thank you, God, Hashem, universe, for bringing us to this moment to fulfill the mitzvah of hearing the sound or the voice of the shofar.
And while playing the shofar and listening to it are aimed at awakening the soul, doing so also awakens memories for many.
So when I was a kid, I remember going to synagogue and they would blow the shofar during Rosh Hashana, and I just remember it being like this really intense, powerful sound. And at my synagogue, they would call all the kids up and folks who had a shofar to come up and blow it for the whole community. And it was actually amazing this year when I heard the shofar blown during services. It brought me back to that moment. It was like this visceral feeling of, wow, I felt connected to my childhood memory of hearing the shofar being blown.
I have very vivid memories of being in my synagogue as a child and hearing it. And, you know, I think on a personal level, every time I hear it, it sort of echoes back to that time. And I really feel it deep down inside. You know, it's always a neat aspect of hearing the shofar. One of the calls is Tekiah Gedola, which is the great call. And you sort of try to blow it as loud and as long as possible. And it's this sort of shared experience. You're right there with the shofar blower. And you know, when it goes on and you think they're about to stop and they keep going, and it's like this climactic, when they finally finish, like you hear everyone exhale, and there's this great feeling, and you really feel moved just in that one little moment. Yeah.
The ancient instrument also has a special meaning for Rabbi Malka Packer, the honor of blowing a shofar, a reminder of the changing role of women in Jewish ritual.
In many traditional communities, the men were the ones to blow the shofar because they're the ones who need to either hear or blow it in order to fulfill the mitzvah, the commandment to hear the blowing of the shofar. So in my family growing up, my brother actually had a shofar. I had a Chanukiah, which is a candelabra used on Hanukkah. So buying the shofar was also really a feminist move for me to like buy something that was really like, wow, oh gosh, what's the word I want? Reclaiming this tradition for myself. So it was really powerful to buy it. And it was actually a really fun experience. I was in rabbinical school, studying in Jerusalem, walking through the shuk saying, okay, I'm about to become a rabbi in a couple of years. I need a really cool shofar. And I found this really big one, and I asked the guy to teach me how to blow it, because I never blew a large one before, and he taught me how to blow it. And I bargained with him for about a half an hour and got a really good deal. So it was very empowering as a woman to really, you know, bargain with this older gentleman to get the shofar that I wanted.
And no shofar is exactly alike.
They come in all sizes. This is definitely one of the larger sizes. The smaller ones are actually much harder to blow. So I actually am not really good at blowing a small one, but this one, and I also told him when I was buying the shofar that I want a shofar that's easier to blow, and this one's easier, and he taught me how to do it, and how to position it on your mouth, and so yeah, the larger one is definitely much easier to blow. And looks cooler.
And like so many traditions, the shofar has also taken a 21st century twist.
I am a big proponent of technology. A big part of my job is helping synagogues and rabbis incorporate technology into their practice. And Dafka, and ironically, I don't like the Shofar app. I don't think there's any sort of technological replacement for it, because, you know, one of, I think, the amazing pieces of it is that connection, that very tangible, physical, and primal connection that goes back thousands of years. When while apps are great, they can't quite replicate that. You know, I've heard of people freestyling on the Shofar. I did a great Purim event in Baltimore. A young rabbi, a colleague and a friend of mine, does primarily work with 20s and 30s, and we brought in a band and we did this great animation of the Purim story. It was really incredible, and the narrator, the guy the Jewish educator who was narrating the story as we played the animation on the screen, and the band played along, freestyled a little bit on the shofar, and it was mostly a representation of how silly Purim can be. I don't think it was seriously a new type of music genre he was exploring, but who knows, maybe.
Sure enough, there is a blues shofar genre. And on the internet, the website ritualwell.org offers a taste and a demonstration by Dr. Paul Wolpe, bioethicist and blues shofar aficionado.
And then, of course, once you get good at it, get yourself a glass of scotch. And you can do this.
Baruch atah Adonai, shomea kol teruat amo Yisrael barachamim. Blessed are you in our lives, Adonai. You hear with love the shofar, true voice of your people Israel. Tekiah, Shevarim Teruah. Tekiah.
The shofar that Alfred Rothstein uses was a gift from the temple. He's honored to use it year after year.
It would be neat if everybody had one on their mantelpiece, you know, and a lot of people do. One, I guess, kind of humorous thing is trying to carry this through airports. When I started, I was living in, I was here, but then later on, when I lived in South Georgia and then northern Florida, I had to carry it through airports because I needed to practice it. And then, I finally got one to practice on. And, right now it would be difficult, I think, to take it through an airport.
Looks like you either have to get like a golf bag or a,
I used to
a bat or something.
Used to carry it was slightly smaller than this. I would carry it in a sock, and they would let me through. Now,
you don't want
not so much. I think.
You don't want to check it?
No, wouldn't want to check it. If something happened to it, that wouldn't be good.
You ever think about the RAM?
Yeah. Yeah. Are you asking me about the RAM?
Yeah.
Maybe we should be recognizing the RAM a little more. I don't know.
Chiavari, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah.